come to Yale University today and be able to deliver a speech on one of my favorite subjects, U.S. empire. I know that it was quite contentious, it seems, that there were a lot of people that didn't want me to come here today and speak to all of you. That's right. I know what that means now. I want to start off by thanking the Yale Union. I'm especially sad that Senator Rick Scott couldn't make it. I'm sure you had many opinions on whether or not we should end the U.S. empire and the global capitalist system, which is what I will be talking about today. And then your grandparents are probably going to hear about it on Fox News tomorrow. But it's an interesting resolution, end the U.S. empire. It's interesting because how do you end something that's already in the process of dying? Because that's the situation with the American empire as it stands today. The empire of the United States was born in the Spanish-American War and rose to the position of global superpower during World War II. People are hissing World War II. That's crazy. That was a good one that we fought. Sure, you can trace America's imperial roots to killing and stealing from the Native Americans or to the Mexican-American War, but America's status as a transoceanic power came with the dawn of the 20th century. After the Second World War, the American empire was in a time of expansion. We benefited greatly from our distance from the damage to the war itself. We hadn't suffered the terrible losses that our allies did, like in the USSR, with more than 20 million slain, defeating the Nazi scourge. But the Axis powers had been defeated. But the United States, fueled by anti-communist fervor, turned against its former ally, the Soviet Union. This next phase of the American empire was structured as a world competition between Washington and Moscow. Everywhere the United States looked, it found communists under the floorboards, under the beds, both real and imagined. And naturally, this anti-communist struggle went hand in hand with American imperial interest. From Europe to East Asia, the interests of our investors and our corporations were protected. And protected unconditionally, mind you. And rather than start converting our swords into plowshares, at the end of World War II, we dropped atom bombs, 2 of them to be exact, to show the rest of the world that we had that capacity to change the tides of history in an irreparable manner. We helped out Nazi and Japanese war criminals. We got into a hot war in Korea where we used the information that we got from those pardoned Japanese war criminals, chemical and biological warfare on Korea. And we began this long-term worldwide Cold War. In other words, we became the monsters that we had supposedly vanquished. What Americans call the Cold War was, to most of the people on the planet, an endless series of butcheries, each more perverse and more tragic than the last. In Korea, the United States dropped 635,000 tons of bombs. By comparison, the United States dropped 500 tons of bombs in the entire Pacific theater in World War II. The United States and its allies destroyed Korea cut the peninsula into two, built up an anti-communist dictatorship in the southern half, and have maintained a 75-year economic war against the northern half. Global American aggression during this period, however, was not limited to the military. Sometimes we used covert operations to take out socialist governments, replacing them with our favorite clients. This was exceptionally effective in the Third World, where the American empire went into overdrive. Take the case of Chiquita. Some of you might be familiar with this company. Today, it's one of the world's biggest food companies. But once upon a time, it was called the United Fruit Company. And for a decade, the United Fruit Company worked as kind of a state within a state in Guatemala. All resources in the country, land, labor, transportation, you name it, were mobilized in service of United Fruit and its investors. Essentially, there was no part of the state left uncaptured by United Fruit. But a left-wing government came into power in Guatemala. After a 1944 revolution, and this socialist government pursued, trigger warning for all the capitalists in here, land reform. To make matters worse, they tried to break U.S. corporate control over their land and to reappropriate it to Guatemala's vast peasantry. To make it even scarier, they also reformed the labor code, giving the power to strike to the workers on United Fruit's plantations. But Uncle Sam had different plans. That was far too much. I should point out that the American Secretary of State, John Foster Dulles, you might be aware of this person, had previously been United Fruit's corporate lawyer. Now, he was in a position to back them up. In 1954, the CIA organized a coup d'etat in Guatemala. They did this by isolating Guatemala diplomatically, punishing it economically, cutting off weapons purchases, and when Guatemala was weakened, the CIA organized an army in exile to finish the job and to throw out the socialist government. The CIA drew up a list of a dozen communists to be killed, dozens of communists to be killed by assassination. Guatemala has suffered in poverty and violence for most of its history since then. Now, many people have rightfully wondered, what was the point of defeating the Nazis if we went on to dominate so much of the globe as violently as we have? Was the point of all of it so that we could have the rest of the world to ourselves? The Guatemalan president, Juan José Arevalo, delivered a speech at the height of the American pressure campaign that kind of channels that exact same question. Before the coup d'etat, he said these words, and I think those words still ring true today. He said, and I quote, "The war that began in 1939 ended, but in the ideological dialogue between the two worlds and two leaders, Roosevelt lost the war. The real victor was Adolf Hitler. It is my personal opinion that the contemporary world is moved by the ideas that served as the foundation on which Hitler rose to power." 70 years later, I think history has proven Arevalo right. In place after place, time after time, the United States can never settle down its imperial bloodlust, this forever hunt for manifest destiny. We can draw a straight line from indigenous massacres of the early United States to the 20th century, killing fields that we have created in the Third World.